291. That in which there is this reflection of the universe, as of a city in a mirror, that Brahman art thou. Knowing this thou wilt attain the consummation of thy life. 292. That which is real in one's own primeval essence. That knowledge and bliss absolute, the one without a second, which is beyond form and activity, attaining that one should cease to identify oneself with one's false bodies, like an actor giving up his assumed mask. 293. This objective universe is absolutely unreal. Neither is egoism a reality, for it is observed to be momentary. How can the perception, I know all, be true of egoism, etc., which are momentary? 294. But the real I is that which witnesses the ego, and the rest it exists always, even in the state of profound sleep. The Shruti itself says, it is birthless, eternal, etc. Therefore the Paramatman is different from the gross and subtle bodies. 295. The knower of all changes in things subject to change should necessarily be eternal and changeless. The unreality of the gross and subtle bodies is again and again clearly observed in imagination, dream and profound sleep. 296. Therefore give up the identification with this lump of flesh, the gross body, as well as with the ego or the subtle body, which are both imagined by the body, realizing thy own self, which is knowledge absolute and not to be denied in the past, present or future. Attain to peace. 297. Cease to identify thyself with the family, lineage, name, form and the order of life which pertain to the body that is like a rotten corpse. To a man of realization, similarly, giving up ideas of agency and so forth, which are attributes of the subtle body, be the essence of bliss absolute. 298. Other obstacles are also observed to exist for men, which lead to transmigration. The root of them, for the above reasons, is the first modification of nescience called egoism. 299. So long as one has any relation to this wicked ego, there should not be the least talk about liberation, which is unique. 300. Freed from the clutches of egoism, as the moon from those of Rahu, man attains Tohi's real nature, and becomes pure, infinite, ever blissful and self-luminous. 301. That which has been created by the body extremely diluted by nescience, and which is perceived in this body as I am such and such, when that egoism is totally destroyed, one attains an unobstructed identity with Brahman. 302. The treasure of the bliss of Brahman is coiled round by the mighty and dreadful serpent of egoism, and guarded for its own use by means of its three fierce hoods consisting of the three gunas. Only the wise man, destroying it by severing its three hoods with the great sword of realization in accordance with the teachings of the Shrutis, can enjoy this treasure which confers bliss. 303. As long as there is a trace of poisoning left in the body, how can one hope for recovery? Similar is the effect of egoism on the yogi's liberation. 304. Through the complete cessation of egoism, through the stoppage of the diversamental waves due to it, and through the discrimination of the inner reality, one realizes that reality as I am this. 305. Give up immediately thy identification with egoism. The agent, which is by its nature a modification, is endued with a reflection of the self, and diverts one from being established in the self, identifying thyself with which thou hast come. By this relative existence, full of the miseries of birth, decay and death, though thou art the witness, the essence of knowledge and bliss absolute. 306. But for thy identification with that egoism there can never be any transmigration for thee who art immutable and eternally the same, the knowledge absolute, omnipresent, the bliss absolute, and of untarnished glory. 307. Therefore destroying this egoism, Thy enemy, which appears like a thorn sticking in the throat of a man taking meal, with the great sword of realization. Enjoy directly and freely the bliss of thy own empire, the majesty of the Atman. 308. Checking the activities of egoism, etc., and giving up all attachment through the realization of the supreme reality. Be free from all duality through the enjoyment of the bliss of self. And remain quiet in Brahman, for thou hast attained thy infinite nature. 309. Even though completely rooted out, this terrible egoism, if revolved in the mind of an for a moment, returns to life and creates hundreds of mischiefs, like a cloud ushered in by the wind during the rainy season. 310. Overpowering this enemy, egoism, not a moment's respite should be given to it by thinking on the sense objects. That is verily the cause of its coming back to life, like water to a citron tree that has almost dried up. 311. He alone who has identified himself with the body as greedy after sense pleasures, how can one, devoid of the body idea, be greedy like him? Hence the tendency to think on the sense objects is verily the cause of the bondage of transmigration, giving rise to an idea of distinction or duality. 312. When the effects are developed, the seed also is observed to be such. And when the effects are destroyed, the seed also is seen to be destroyed. Therefore one must subdue the effects. 313. Through the increase of desires selfish work increases. And when there is an increase of selfish work, there is an increase of desire also. And man's transmigration is never at an end. 314. For the sake of breaking the chain of transmigration, the sannyasin should burn to ashes those two. For thinking of the sense objects and doing selfish acts lead to an increase of desires. 315 to 316. Augmented by these two, desires produce one's transmigration. The way to destroy these three, however, lies in looking upon everything, under all circumstances, always, everywhere and in all respects, as Brahman and Brahman alone. Through the strengthening of the longing to be one with Brahman, those three are annihilated. 317. With the cessation of selfish action the brooding on the sense objects is stopped, which is followed by the destruction of desires. The destruction of desires is liberation, and this is considered as liberation in life. 318. When the desire for realizing Brahman has a marked manifestation, the egoistic desires readily vanish, as the most intense darkness effectively vanishes before the glow of the rising sun. 319. Darkness and the numerous evils that attend on it are not noticed when the sun rises. Similarly, on the realization of the bliss absolute, there is neither bondage nor the least trace of misery. 320. Causing the external and internal universe, which are now perceived, to vanish, and meditating on the reality, the bliss embodied, one should pass one's time watchfully, if there be any residue of prarabdha work left. 321. One should never be careless in one's steadfastness to Brahman. Bhagavan Sanatkumara, who is Brahma's son, has called inadvertence to be death itself. 322. There is no greater danger for the Jananan than carelessness about his own real nature. From this comes delusion, thence egoism. This is followed by bondage, and then comes misery. 323. Finding even a wise man hankering after the sense objects, oblivion torments him through the evil propensities of the body, as a woman does her doting paramour. 324. As sedge, even if removed, does not stay away for a moment, but covers the water again, so Maya or nescience also covers even a wise man, if he is averse to meditation on the self. 325. If the mind ever so slightly strays from the ideal and becomes outgoing, then it goes down and down, just as a play ball inadvertently dropped on the staircase bounds down from one step to another. 326. The mind that is attached to the sense objects reflects on their qualities. From mature reflection arises desire, and after desiring a man sets about having that thing. 327. Hence to the discriminating knower of Brahman there is no worse death than inadvertence with regard to concentration. But the man who is concentrated attains complete success. Therefore, carefully concentrate thy mind on Brahman. 328. Through inadvertence a man deviates from his real nature, and the man who has thus deviated falls. The fallen man comes to ruin, and is scarcely seen to rise again. 329. Therefore one should give up reflecting on the sense objects, which is the root of all mischief. He who is completely aloof even while living, is alone aloof after the dissolution of the body. The Yajur Veda declares that there is fear for one who sees the least bit of distinction. 330. Whenever the wise man sees the least difference in the infinite Brahman, at once that which he sees as different through mistake becomes a source of terror to him. 331. He who identifies himself with the objective universe which has been denied by hundreds of shrutis, smritis and reasonings, experiences misery after misery, like a thief, for he does something forbidden. 332. He who has devoted himself to meditation on the reality, Brahman, and is free from nescience, attains to the eternal glory of the Atman. But he who dwells on the unreal, the universe, is destroyed. That this is so is evidenced in the case of one who is not a thief and one who is a thief. 333. The sannyasin should give up dwelling on the unreal, which causes bondage, and should always fix his thoughts on the Atman as I myself am this. For the steadfastness in Brahman through the realization of one's identity with it gives rise to bliss and thoroughly removes the misery born of any science, which one experiences in the ignorant state. 334. The dwelling on external objects will only intensify its fruits, viz., furthering evil propensities, which grow worse and worse. Knowing this through discrimination, one should avoid external objects and constantly apply oneself to meditation on the Atman. 335. When the external world is shut out, the mind is cheerful, and cheerfulness of the mind brings on the vision of the Paramatman. When it is perfectly realized, the chain of birth and death is broken. Hence the shutting out of the external world is the stepping stone to liberation. 336. Where is the man who being learned, able to discriminate the real from the unreal, believing the Vedas as authority, fixing his gaze on the Atman, the supreme reality, and being a seeker after liberation, will, like a child, consciously have recourse to the unreal, the universe, which will cause his fall. 337. There is no liberation for one who has attachment to the body etc. And the liberated man has no identification with the body etc. The sleeping man is not awake, nor is the waking man asleep, for these two states are contradictory in nature. 338. He is free who, knowing through his mind the self in moving and unmoving objects and observing it as their substratum, gives up all superimpositions and remains as the absolute and the infinite self. 339. To realize the whole universe as the self is the means of getting rid of bondage. There is nothing higher than identifying the universe with the self. One realizes this state by excluding the objective world through steadfastness in the eternal Atman. 340. How is the exclusion of the objective world possible for one who lives identified with the body, whose mind is attached to the perception of external objects, and who performs various acts for that end? This exclusion should be carefully practiced by sages who have renounced all kinds of duties and actions and objects, who are passionately devoted to the eternal Atman, and who wish to possess an undying bliss. 341. To the sannyasin who has gone through the act of hearing the Shruti passage, calm, self-controlled, etc., prescribes samadhi for realizing the identity of the universe with the self. 342. Even wise men cannot suddenly destroy egoism after it has once become strong, barring those who are perfectly calm through the nirvikalpa samadhi. Desires are verily the effect of innumerable births. 343. The projecting power, through the aid of the veiling power, connects a man with the siren of an egoistic idea, and distracts him through the attributes of that. 344. It is extremely difficult to conquer the projecting power unless the veiling power is perfectly rooted out, and that covering over the Atman naturally vanishes when the subject is perfectly distinguished from the objects, like milk from water, but the victory is undoubtedly complete and free from obstacles when there is no oscillation of the mind due to the unreal sense objects. 345. Perfect discrimination brought on by direct realization distinguishes the true nature of the subject from that of the object, and breaks the bond of delusion created by Maya, and there is no more transmigration for one who has been freed from this. 346. The knowledge of the identity of the Jiva and Brahman entirely consumes the impenetrable forest of avidya or nescience. For one who has realized the state of oneness, is there any seed left for future transmigration? 347. The veil that hides truth vanishes only when the reality is fully realized. Thence follow the destruction of false knowledge and the cessation of misery brought about by its distracting influence. 348. These three are observed in the case of a rope when its real nature is fully known. Therefore the wise man should know the real nature of things for the breaking of his bonds. 349 to 350. Like iron manifesting as sparks through contact with fire, the buddhi manifests itself as knower and known through the inherence of Brahman. As these two, knower and known, the effects of the buddhi, are observed to be unreal in the case of delusion, dream and fancy. Similarly, the modifications of the prakriti, from egoism down to the body and all sense objects, are also unreal. Their unreality is verily due to their being subject to change every moment. But the Atman never changes. 351. The Supreme Self is ever of the nature of eternal, indivisible knowledge, one without a second, the witness of the buddhi and the rest, distinct from the gross and subtle. The implied meaning of the term and idea, the embodiment of inward, eternal bliss. 352. The wise man, discriminating thus the real and the unreal, ascertaining the truth through his illuminative insight, and realizing his own self which is knowledge absolute, gets rid of the obstructions and directly attains peace. 353. When the Atman, the one without a second, is realized by means of the nirvikalpa samadhi, then the heart's knot of ignorance is totally destroyed. 354. Such imaginations as thou, I, or this take place through the defects of the buddhi. But when the Paramatman, the Absolute, the one without a second, manifests itself in samadhi, all such imaginations are dissolved for the aspirant, through the realization of the truth of Brahman. 355. The sannyasin, calm, self-controlled, perfectly retiring from the sense world, forbearing, and devoting himself to the practice of samadhi, always reflects on his own self being the self of the whole universe, destroying completely by this means the imaginations which are due to the gloom of ignorance. He lives blissfully as Brahman, free from action and the oscillations of the mind. 356. Those alone are free from the bondage of transmigration who, attaining samadhi, have merged the objective world, the sense organs, the mind, nay, the very ego, in the Atman, the knowledge absolute, and none else. who but dabble in second-hand talks. 357. Through the diversity of the supervening conditions. Upadis. A man is apt to think of himself as also full of diversity. But with the removal of these he is again his own self, the immutable. Therefore the wise man should ever devote himself to the practice of nirvikalpa samadhi, for the dissolution of the upadis. 358. The man who is attached to the real becomes real through his one-pointed devotion, just as the cockroach thinking intently on the Brahmara is transformed into a Brahmara. 359. Just as the cockroach, giving up the attachment to all other actions, thinks intently on the Brahmara and becomes transformed into that worm, exactly in the same manner the yogi, meditating on the truth of the Paramatman, attains to it through his one-pointed devotion to that. 360. The truth of the Paramatman is extremely subtle, and cannot be reached by the gross outgoing tendency of the mind. It is only accessible to noble souls with perfectly pure minds, by means of samadhi brought on by an extraordinary fineness of the mental state. 361. As gold purified by thorough heating on the fire gives up its impurities and attains to its own luster, so the mind, through meditation, gives up its impurities of sattva, rajas and tamas, and attains to the reality of Brahman. 362. When the mind, thus purified by constant practice, is merged in Brahman, then samadhi passes on from the savakalpa to the nirvikalpa stage, and leads directly to the realization of the bliss of Brahman, the one without a second. 363. By this samadhi are destroyed all desires which are like knots. All work is at an end, and inside and out there takes place everywhere and always the spontaneous manifestation of one's real nature. 364. Reflection should be considered 100 times superior to hearing, and meditation 100,000 times superior even to reflection. But the nirvikalpa samadhi is infinite in its results. 365. By the nirvikalpa samadhi the truth of Brahman is clearly and definitely realized, but not otherwise. For then the mind, being unstable by nature, is apt to be mixed up with other perceptions. 366. Hence with the mind calm and the senses controlled always drown the mind in the supreme self that is within, and through the realization of thy identity with that reality destroy the darkness created by nescience, which is without beginning. 367. The first steps to yoga are control of speech, non-receiving of gifts, entertaining of no expectations, freedom from activity, and always living in a retired place. 368. Living in a retired place serves to control the sense organs. Control of the sense helps to control the mind. Through control of the mind egoism is destroyed, and this again gives the yogi an unbroken realization of the bliss of Brahman. Therefore the man of reflection should always strive only to control the mind. 369. Restrain speech in the manas, and restrain manas in the buddhi. This again restrain in the witness of buddhi, and merging that also in the infinite absolute self, attain to supreme peace. 370. The body, pranas, organs, manas, buddhi and the rest, with whichsoever of these supervening adjuncts the mind is associated, the yogi is transformed, as it were, into that. 371. When this is stopped, the man of reflection is found to be easily detached from everything, and to get the experience of an abundance of everlasting bliss. 372. It is the man of dispassion, vairagya, who is fit for this internal as well as external renunciation. For the dispassionate man, out of the desire to be free, relinquishes both internal and external attachment. 373. It is only the dispassionate man who, being thoroughly grounded in Brahman, can give up the external attachment to the sense objects and the internal attachment for egoism, etc. 374. Know, O wise man, dispassion and discrimination to be like the two wings of a bird in the case of an aspirant. Unless both are there, none can, with the help of either one, reach the creeper of liberation that grows, as it were, on the top of an edifice. 375. The extremely dispassionate man alone has samadhi, and the man of samadhi alone gets steady realization. The man who has realized the truth is alone free from bondage, and the free soul only experiences eternal bliss. 376. For the man of self-control I do not find any better instrument of happiness than dispassion. And if that is coupled with a highly pure realization of the self, it conduces to the suzerainty of absolute independence. And since this is the gateway to the damsel of everlasting liberation, therefore for thy welfare, be dispassionate both internally and externally, and always fix thy mind on the eternal self. 377. Sever thy craving for the sense objects, which are like poison, for it is the very image of death, and giving up thy pride of caste, family and order of life, fling actions to a distance. Give up thy identification with such unreal things as the body, and fix thy mind on the Atman, for thou art really the witness, Brahman, unshackled by the mind, the one without a second, and supreme. 378. Fixing the mind firmly on the ideal, Brahman, and restraining the external organs in their respective centers, with the body held steady and taking no thought for its maintenance. Attaining identity with Brahman and being one with it, always drink joyfully of the bliss of Brahman in thy own self, without a break. What is the use of other things which are entirely hollow? 379. Giving up the thought of the non-self which is evil and productive of misery. Think of the self, the bliss absolute, which conduces to liberation. 380. Here shines eternally the Atman, the self-effulgent witness of everything, which is the buddhi for its seat, making this Atman which is distinct from the unreal, the goal. Meditate on it as thy own self, excluding all other thought. 381. Reflecting on this Atman continuously and without any foreign thought intervening, one must distinctly realize it to be one's real self. 382. Strengthening one's identification with this, and giving up that with egoism and the rest, one must live without any concern for them, as if they were trifling things, like a cracked jar or the like. 383. Fixing the purified mind in the self, the witness, the knowledge absolute, and slowly making it still, one must then realize one's own infinite self. 384. One should behold the Atman, the indivisible and infinite, free from all limiting adjuncts such as the body, organs, pranas, manas and egoism, which are creations of one's own ignorance, like the infinite sky. 385. The sky, divested of the hundreds of limiting adjuncts such as a jar, a pitcher, a receptacle for grains or a needle, is one, and not diverse. Exactly in a similar way the pure Brahman, when divested of egoism etc., is verily one. 386. The limiting adjuncts from Brahma down to a clump of grass are all wholly unreal. Therefore one should realize one's own infinite self as the only principle. 387. That in which something is imagined to exist through error, is, when rightly discriminated, that thing itself, and not distinct from it. When the error is gone, the reality about the snake falsely perceived becomes the rope. Similarly the universe is in reality the Atman. 388. The self is Brahma, the self is Vishnu, the self is Indra, the self is Shiva, the self is all this universe. Nothing exists except the self. 389. The self is within, and the self is without. The self is before and the self is behind. The self is in the south, and the self is in the north. The self likewise is above as also below. 390. As the wave, the foam, the whirlpool, the bubble, etc., are all in essence but water, similarly the chit, knowledge absolute, is all this. From the body up to egoism, everything is verily the chit, homogeneous and pure. 391. All this universe known through speech and mind is nothing but Brahman. There is nothing besides Brahman, which exists beyond the utmost range of the Prakriti, are the pitcher, jug, jar, etc., known to be distinct from the clay of which they are composed. It is the deluded man who talks of thou and I as an effect of the wine of Maya. 392. The Shruti, in the passage, where one sees nothing else, etc., declares by an accumulation of verbs the absence of duality, in order to remove the false superimpositions. 393. The Supreme Brahman is, like the sky, pure, absolute, infinite, motionless and sea-hangless, devoid of interior or exterior, the one existence, without a second, and is one's own self. Is there any other object of knowledge? 394. What is the use of dilating on this subject? The jiva is no other than Brahman. This whole extended universe is Brahman itself. The Shruti inculcates the Brahman without a second. And it is an indubitable fact that people of enlightened minds who know their identity with Brahman, and have given up their connection with the objective world, live palpably unifold with Brahman as eternal knowledge and bliss. 395. First, destroy the hopes raised by egoism in this filthy gross body. Then do the same forcibly with the air-like subtle body. And realizing Brahman, the embodiment of eternal bliss, whose glories the scriptures proclaim, as thy own self, live as Brahman. 396. So long as man has any regard for this corpse-like body, he is impure, and suffers from his enemies as also from birth, death and disease. But when he thinks of himself as pure, as the essence of good and immovable, he assuredly becomes free from them. The Shrutis also say this. 397. By the elimination of all apparent existences superimposed on the soul, the Supreme Brahman, infinite, the one without a second and beyond action, remains as itself. 398. When the mind functions are merged in the Paramatman, the Brahman, the Absolute, none of this phenomenal world is seen, whence it is reduced to mere talk. 399. In the one entity, Brahman, the conception of the universe is a mere phantom. Whence can there be any diversity in that which is changeless, formless and absolute? 400. In the one entity devoid of the concepts of seer, seeing and seen, which is changeless, formless and absolute, whence can there be any diversity? 401. In the one entity which is changeless, formless and absolute, and which is perfectly all-pervading and motionless like the ocean after the dissolution of the universe, whence can there be any diversity? 402. Where the root of delusion is dissolved like darkness in light, in the supreme reality, the one without a second, the absolute, whence can there be any diversity? 403. How can the talk of diversity apply to the supreme reality which is one and homogeneous? Who has ever observed diversity in the unmixed bliss of the state of profound sleep? 404. Even before the realization of the highest truth, the universe does not exist in the absolute Brahman, the essence of existence. In none of the three states of time is the snake ever observed in the rope, nor a drop of water in the mirage. 405. The Shrutis themselves declare that this dualistic universe is but a delusion from the standpoint of absolute truth. This is also experienced in the state of dreamless sleep. 406. That which is superimposed upon something else is observed by the wise to be identical with the substratum, as in the case of the rope appearing as the snake. The apparent difference depends solely on error. 407. This apparent universe has its root in the mind, and never persists after the mind is annihilated. Therefore dissolve the mind by concentrating it on the Supreme Self, which is thy inmost essence. 408. The wise man realizes in his heart, through samadhi, the infinite Brahman, which is something of the nature of eternal knowledge and absolute bliss, which has no exemplar, which transcends all limitations, is ever free and without activity, and which is like the limitless sky, indivisible and absolute. 409. The wise man realizes in his heart, through samadhi, the infinite Brahman, which is devoid of the ideas of cause and effect, which is the reality beyond all imaginations, homogeneous, matchless, beyond the range of proofs, established by the pronouncements of the Vedas, and ever familiar to us as the sense of the ego. 410. The wise man realizes in his heart, through samadhi, the infinite Brahman, which is undecaying and immortal, the positive entity which precludes all negations, which resembles the placid ocean and is without a name, in which there are neither merits nor demerits, and which is eternal, pacified and one. 411. With the mind restrained in samadhi, behold in thyself the Atman, of infinite glory, cut off thy bondage strengthened by the impressions of previous births, and carefully attain the consummation of thy birth as a human being. 412. Meditate on the Atman, which resides in thee, which is devoid of all limiting adjuncts, the existence knowledge bliss absolute, the one without a second, and thou shalt no more come under the round of births and deaths. 413. After the body has once been cast off to a distance like a corpse, the sage nevermore attaches himself to it, though it is visible as an appearance, like the shadow of a man, owing to the experience of the effects of past deeds. 414. Realizing the Atman, the eternal, pure knowledge and bliss, throw far away this limitation of a body, which is inert and filthy by nature. Then remember it no more. For something that has been vomited excites but disgust when called in memory. 415. Burning all this, with its very root, in the fire of Brahman, the eternal and absolute self, the truly wise man thereafter remains alone, as the Atman, the eternal, pure knowledge and bliss. 416. The knower of truth does no more care whether this body, spun out by the threads of prarabdha work, falls or remains, like the garland on a cow, for his mind functions are at rest in the Brahman, the essence of bliss. 417. Realizing the Atman, the infinite bliss, as his very self, with what object, or for whom, should the knower of truth cherish the body? 418. The yogi who has attained perfection and is liberated in life gets this as result, he enjoys eternal bliss in his mind, internally as well as externally. 419. The result of dispassion is knowledge. That of knowledge is withdrawal from sense pleasures, which leads to the experience of the bliss of the self, whence follows peace. 420. If there is an absence of the succeeding stages, the preceding ones are futile. When the series is perfect, the cessation of the objective world, extreme satisfaction, and matchless bliss follow as a matter of course. 421. Being unruffled by earthly troubles is the result in question of knowledge. How can a man who did various loathsome deeds during the state of delusion commit the same afterwards, possessed of discrimination? 422. The result of knowledge should be the turning away from unreal things, while attachment to these is the result of ignorance. This is observed in the case of one who knows a mirage and things of that sort, and one who does not. Otherwise, What other tangible result do the knowers of Brahman obtain? 423. If the heart's knot of ignorance is totally destroyed, what natural cause can there be for inducing such a man to selfish action? For he is averse to sense pleasures? 424. When the sense objects excite no more desire, then is the culmination of dispassion. The extreme perfection of knowledge is the absence of any impulsion of the egoistic idea, and the limit of self-withdrawal is reached when the mind functions that have been merged appear no more. 425. Freed from all sense of reality of the external sense objects on account of his always remaining merged in Brahman, only seeming to enjoy such sense objects as are offered by others, like one sleepy, or like a child, beholding this world as one seen in dreams, and having cognition of it at chance moments. Rare indeed is such a man, the enjoyer of the fruits of endless merit, and he alone is blessed and esteemed on earth. 426. That sannyasin has got a steady illumination who, having his soul wholly merged in Brahman, enjoys eternal bliss, is changeless and free from activity. 427. That kind of mental function which cognizes only the identity of the self and Brahman, purified of all adjuncts, which is free from duality, and which concerns itself only with pure intelligence, is called illumination. He who has this perfectly steady is called a man of steady illumination. 428. He whose illumination is steady, who has constant bliss, and who has almost forgotten the phenomenal universe, is accepted as a man liberated in this very life. 429. He who, even having his mind merged in Brahman, is nevertheless quite alert, but free at the same time from the characteristics of the waking state, and whose realization is free from desires, is accepted as a man liberated in life. 430. He whose cares about the phenomenal state have been appeased, who, thought possessed of a body consisting of parts, is yet devoid of parts, and whose mind is free from anxiety, is accepted as a man liberated in life. 431. The absence of the ideas of I and mine, even in this existing body which follows as a shadow, is a characteristic of one liberated in life. 432. Not dwelling on enjoyments of the past, taking no thought for the future and looking with indifference upon the present, are characteristics of one liberated in life. 433. Looking everywhere with an eye of equality in this world, full of elements possessing merits and demerits, and distinct by nature from one another, is a characteristic of one liberated in life. 434. When things pleasant or painful present themselves, to remain unruffled in mind in both cases, through the sameness of attitude, is a characteristic of one liberated in life. 435. The absence of all ideas of interior or exterior in the case of a sannyasin, owing to his mind being engrossed in tasting the bliss of Brahman, is a characteristic of one liberated in life. 436. He who lives unconcerned, devoid of all ideas of I and mine with regard to the body, organs, etc., as well as to his duties, is known as a man liberated in life. 437. He who has realized his Brahmanhood aided by the scriptures, and is free from the bondage of transmigration, is known as a man liberated in life. 438. He who never has the idea of I with regard to the body, organs, etc., nor that of it in respect of things other than these, is accepted as one liberated in life. 439. He who through his illumination never differentiates the Jiva and Brahman, nor the universe and Brahman, is known as a man liberated in life. 440. He who feels just the same when his body is either worshipped by the good or tormented by the wicked, is known as a man liberated in life. 441. The sannyasins in whom the sense objects directed by others are engulfed like flowing rivers in the sea and produce no change, owing to his identity with the existence absolute, is indeed liberated. 442. For one who has realized the truth of Brahman, there is no more attachment to the sense objects as before. If there is, that man has not realized his identity with Brahman, but is one whose senses are outgoing in their tendency. 443. If it be urged that he is still attached to the sense objects through the momentum of his old desires, the reply is, no. For desires get weakened through the realization of one's identity with Brahman. 444. The propensities of even a confirmed libertine are checked in the presence of his mother. Just so, when Brahman, the bliss absolute, has been realized, the man of realization has no longer any worldly tendency. 445. One who is constantly practicing meditation is observed to have external perceptions. The Shrutis mention prarabdha work in the case of such a man, and we can infer this from results actually seen. 446. Prarabdha work is acknowledged to persist so long as there is the perception of happiness and the like. Every result is preceded by an action, and nowhere is it seen to accrue independently of action. 447. Through the realization of one's identity with Brahman, all the accumulated actions of 100 crore of cycles come to naught, like the actions of dream state on awakening. 448. Can the good actions or dreadful sins that a man fancies himself doing in the dream state lead him to heaven or hell after he has awakened from sleep? 449. Realizing the Atman, which is unattached and indifferent like the sky, the aspirant never touched in the least by actions yet to be done. 450. The sky is not affected by the smell of liquor merely through its connection with the jar. Similarly, the Atman is not, through its connection with the limitations, affected by the properties thereof. 451. The work which has fashioned this body prior to the dawning of knowledge is not destroyed by that knowledge without yielding its fruits, like the arrow shot at an object. 452. The arrow which is shot at an object with the idea that it is a tiger does not, when that object is perceived to be a cow, check itself, but pierces the object with full force. 453. Prarabdha work is certainly very strong for the man of realization, and is spent only by the actual experience of its fruit, while the actions previously accumulated and those yet to come are destroyed by the fire of perfect knowledge. But none of the three at all affects those who, realizing their identity with Brahman, are always living absorbed in that idea. They are verily the transcendent Brahman. 454. For the sage who lives in his own self as Brahman, the one without a second, devoid of identification with the limiting adjuncts, the question of the existence of prarabdha work is meaningless, like the question of a man who has awakened from sleep having any connection with the objects seen in the dream state. 455. The man who has awakened from sleep never has any idea of I, or mine, with regard to his dream body and the dream objects that ministered to that body, but lives quite awake, as his own self. 456. He has no desire to substantiate the unreal objects, nor is he seen to maintain that dream world. If he still clings to those unreal objects, he is emphatically declared to be not yet free from sleep. 457. Similarly, he who is absorbed in Brahman lives identified with that eternal reality and beholds nothing else. As one has a memory of the objects seen in a dream, so the man of realization has a memory of the everyday actions such as eating. 458. The body has been fashioned by karma, so one may imagine prarabdha work with reference to it, but it is not reasonable to attribute the same to the Atman, for the Atman is never the outcome of work. 459. The Shrutis, whose words are infallible, declare the Atman to be birthless, eternal and undecaying. So, the man who lives identified with that, how can prarabdha work be attributed? 460. Prarabdha work can be maintained only so long as one lives identified with the body. But no one admits that the man of realization ever identifies himself with the body. Hence prarabdha work should be rejected in his case. 461. The attributing of prarabdha work to the body even is certainly an error. How can something that is superimposed on another have any existence? And how can that which is unreal have a birth? And how can that which has not been born at all die? So how can prarabdha work exist for something that is unreal? 462 to 463. If the effects of ignorance are destroyed with their root by knowledge, then how does the body live? It is to convince those fools who entertain a doubt like this, that the Shrutis, from a relative standpoint, hypothesize prarabdha work, but not for proving the reality of the body etc. Of the man of realization. 464. There is only Brahman, the one without a second, infinite, without beginning or end, transcendent and changeless. There is no duality whatsoever in it. 465. There is only Brahman, the one without a second, the essence of existence, knowledge and eternal bliss, and devoid of activity. There is no duality whatsoever in it. 466. There is only Brahman, the one without a second, which is within all, homogeneous, infinite, endless, and all-pervading. There is no duality whatsoever in it. 467. There is only Brahman, the one without a second, which is neither to be shened nor taken up nor accepted, and which is without any support. There is no duality whatsoever in it. 468. There is only Brahman, the one without a second, beyond attributes, without parts, subtle, absolute and taintless. There is no duality whatsoever in it. 469. There is only Brahman, the one without a second, whose real nature is incomprehensible, and which is beyond the range of mind and speech. There is no duality whatsoever in it. 470. There is only Brahman, the one without a second, the reality, the one without a second, the reality, effulgent, self-existent, pure, intelligent, and unlike anything finite. There is no duality whatsoever in it. 471. High-souled sannyasins who have got rid of all attachment and discarded all sense enjoyments, and who are serene and perfectly restrained, realize this supreme truth and at the end attain the supreme bliss through their self-realization. 472. Thou, too, discriminate this supreme truth, the real nature of the self, which is bliss undiluted, and shaking off thy delusion created by thy own mind, be free and illumined, and attain the consummation of thy life. 473. Through the samadhi in which the mind has been perfectly stilled, visualize the truth of the self with the eye of clear realization. If the meaning of the scriptural words heard from the Guru is perfectly and indubitably discerned, then it can lead to no more doubt. 474. In the realization of the Atman, the existence knowledge bliss absolute, through the breaking of one's connection with the bondage of avidya or ignorance. The scriptures, reasoning and the words of the Guru are the proofs, while one's own experience earned by concentrating the mind is another proof. 475. Bondage, liberation, satisfaction, anxiety, recovery from illness, hunger and other such things are known only to the man concerned, and knowledge of these to others is a mere inference. 476. The Gurus as well as the Shrutis instruct the disciple, standing aloof, while the man off realization crosses avidya, through illumination alone, backed by the grace of God. 477. himself knowing his indivisible self through his own realization and thus becoming perfect. A man should stand face to face with the Atman, with his mind free from dualistic ideas. 478. The verdict of all discussions on the Vedanta is that the Jiva and the whole universe are nothing but Brahman, and that liberation means abiding in Brahman, the indivisible entity, while the Shrutis themselves are authority for the statement that Brahman is one without a second. 479. Realizing, at a blessed moment, the supreme truth through the above instructions of the Guru, the authority of the scriptures and his own reasoning, with his senses quieted and the mind concentrated, the disciple became immovable in form and perfectly established in the Atman. 480. Concentrating the mind for some time on the Supreme Brahman, he rose, and out of supreme bliss spoke as follows. 481. My mind has vanished, and all its activities have melted. By realizing the identity of the Self and Brahman, I do not know either this or not this, nor what or how much the boundless bliss of Samadhi is. 482. The majesty of the ocean of Supreme Brahman, replete with the swell of the nectar-like bliss of the Self, is verily impossible to express in speech, nor can it be conceived by the mind, in an infinitesimal fraction of which my mind melted like a hailstone getting merged in the ocean, and is now satisfied with that essence of bliss. 483. Where is the universe gone? By whom is it removed? And where is it merged? It was just now seen by me. And has it ceased to exist? It is passing strange. 484. In the ocean of Brahman filled with the nectar of absolute bliss, what is to be shunned and what accepted? What is other than oneself? And what different? 485. I neither see nor hear nor know anything in this. I simply exist as the Self, the eternal bliss, distinct from everything else. 486. Repeated salutations to thee, O noble teacher, who art devoid of attachment, the best among the good souls and the embodiment of the essence of eternal bliss, the one without a second, who art infinite and ever the boundless ocean of mercy. 487. Whose glance, like the shower of concentrated moonbeams, has removed my exhaustion brought on by the afflictions of the world, and in a moment admitted me to the undecaying status of the Atman, the bliss of infinite majesty. 488. Blessed am I have attained the consummation of my life, and am free from the clutches of transmigration. I am the essence of eternal bliss. I am infinite, all through thy mercy. 489. I am unattached. I am disembodied. I am free from the subtle body, and undecaying. I am serene. I am infinite. I am taintless and eternal. 490. I am not the doer. I am not the experiencer. I am changeless and beyond activity. I am the essence of pure knowledge. I am absolute and identified with eternal good. 491. I am indeed different from the seer, listener, speaker, doer and experiencer. I am the essence of knowledge, eternal, without any break, beyond activity, limitless, unattached and infinite. 492. I am neither this nor that, but the Supreme, the illuminer of both. I am indeed Brahman, the one without a second, pure, devoid of interior or exterior and infinite. 493. I am indeed Brahman, the one without a second, matchless, the reality that has no beginning, beyond such imagination as thou or I, or this or that, the essence of eternal bliss, the truth. 494. I am Narayana, the slayer of Naraka. I am the destroyer of Tripura, the supreme being, the ruler. I am knowledge absolute, the witness of everything. I have no other ruler but myself. I am devoid of the ideas of I and mine. 495. I alone reside as knowledge in all beings. Being their internal and external support, I myself am the experiencer and all that is experienced. Whatever I looked upon as this or the not-self previously. 496. In me, the ocean of infinite bliss. The waves of the universe are created and destroyed by the playing of the wind of Maya. 497. Such ideas as gross or subtle are erroneously imagined in me by people through the manifestation of things superimposed, just as in the indivisible and absolute time, cycles, years, half-years, seasons, etc., are imagined. 498. That which is superimposed by the grossly ignorant fools can never taint the substratum. The great rush of waters observed in a mirage never wets the desert tracts. 499. I am beyond contamination like the sky. I am distinct from things illumined, like the sun. I am always motionless like the mountain. I am limitless like the ocean. 500. I have no connection with the body, as the sky with clouds. So how can the states of wakefulness, dream and profound sleep, which are attributes of the body, affect me? 501. It is the upadi, superimposed attribute, that comes, and it is that alone which goes. That, again, performs actions and experiences, their fruits, that alone decays and dies. Whereas I ever remain firm like the Kula mountain. 501. For me who am always the same and devoid of parts, there is neither engaging in work nor cessation from it. How can that which is one, concentrated, without break and infinite like the sky, ever strive? 502. How can there be merits and demerits for me, who am without organs, without mind, changeless, and formless, who am the realization of bliss absolute? The Shruti also mentions this in the passage, not touched, etc. 503. If heat or cold, or good or evil, happens to touch the shadow of a man's body, it affects not in the least the man himself, who is distinct from the shadow. 504. The properties of things observed do not affect the witness, which is distinct from the changeless and indifferent, as the properties of a room do not affect the lamp that illumines it. 505. As the sun is a mere witness of men's actions, as fire burns everything without distinction, and as the rope is related to a thing superimposed on it, so am I, the unchangeable self, the intelligence absolute. 506. I neither do nor make others do any action. I neither enjoy nor make others enjoy. In either see nor make others see. I am that self-effulgent, transcendent Atman. 507. When the supervening adjunct, upadi, is moving, the resulting movement of the reflection is ascribed by fools to the object reflected, such as the sun, which is free from activity. And they think, I am the doer, I am the experiencer, I am killed. Oh, alas! Quote, 508. Let this inert body drop down in water or on land. I am not touched by its properties, like the sky by the properties of the jar. 509. The passing states of the body, such as agency, experience, cunning, drunkenness, dullness, bondage and freedom, are never in reality in the self, the supreme Brahman, the absolute, the one without a second. 510. Let there be changes in the Prakriti in 10, 100, or 1,000 ways. What have I, the unattached knowledge absolute, got to do with them? Never do the clouds touch the sky. 511. I am verily that Brahman, the one without a second, which is like the sky, subtle, without beginning or end, in which the whole universe from the indifferentiated down to the gross body appears merely as a shadow. 512. I am verily that Brahman, the one without a second, which is the support of all, which illumines all things, which has infinite forms, is omnipresent, devoid of multiplicity, eternal, pure, unmoved and absolute. 513. I am verily that Brahman, the one without a second, which transcends the endless differentiations of Maya, which is the inmost essence of all, is beyond the range of consciousness, and which is truth, knowledge, infinity and bliss absolute. 514. I am without activity, changeless, without parts, formless, absolute, eternal, without any other support, the one without a second. 515. I am the universal, I am the all, I am transcendent, the one without a second. I am absolute and infinite knowledge. I am bliss and indivisible. 516. This splendor of the sovereignty of self-effulgence I have received by virtue of the supreme majesty of thy grace. Salutations to thee, O glorious, noble-minded teacher. Salutations again and again. 517. O Master, thou hast out of sheer grace awakened me from sleep and completely saved me, who was wandering in an interminable dream, in a forest of birth, decay and death created by illusion, being tormented day after day by countless afflictions, and sorely troubled by the tiger of egoism. 518. Salutations to thee, O Prince of Teachers, thou unnameable greatness, that art ever the same and dost manifest thyself as this universe, thee I salute. 519. Seeing the worthy disciple, who had attained the bliss of the self, realized the truth and was glad at heart, thus prostrating himself, that noble, ideal teacher again addressed the following excellent words. 520. The universe is an unbroken series of perceptions of Brahman. Hence it is in all respects nothing but Brahman. See this with the eye of illumination and a serene mind. Under all circumstances, is one who has eyes ever found to see all around anything else but forms? Similarly, what is there except Brahman to engage the intellect of a man of realization? 521. What wise man would discard that enjoyment of supreme bliss and revel in things unsubstantial? When the exceedingly charming moon is shining, who would wish to look at a painted moon? 522. From the perception of unreal things there is neither satisfaction nor a cessation of misery. Therefore, being satisfied with the realization of the bliss absolute, the one without a second, live happily in a state of identity with that reality. 523. Beholding the self alone in all circumstances, thinking of the self, the one without a second, and enjoying the bliss of the self. Pass thy time, O noble soul. 524. Dualistic conceptions in the Atman, the infinite knowledge, the absolute, are like imagining castles in the air. Therefore, always identifying thyself with the bliss absolute, the one without a second, and thereby attaining supreme peace. Remain quiet. 525. To the sage who has realized Brahman, the mind, which is the cause of unreal fancies, becomes perfectly tranquil. This verily is his state of quietude, in which, identified with Brahman, he has constant enjoyment of the bliss absolute, the one without a second. 526. To the man who has realized his own nature, and drinks the undiluted bliss of the self, there is nothing more exhilarating than the quietude that comes of a state of desirelessness. 527. The illumined sage, whose only pleasure is in the self, ever lives at ease, whether going or staying, sitting or lying, or in any other condition. 528. The noble soul who has perfectly realized the truth, and whose mind functions meet with no obstruction, no more depends upon conditions of place, time, posture, direction, moral disciplines, objects of meditation and so forth. What regulative conditions can there be in knowing one's own self? 529. To know that this is a jar. What condition, forsooth, is necessary except that the means of knowledge be free from defect? which alone ensures a cognition of the object. 530. So this Atman, which is an eternal verity, manifests itself as soon as the right means of knowledge is present, and does not depend upon either place or time or internal purity. 531. The consciousness, I am Devadatta, is independent of circumstances. Similar is the case with the realization of the knower of Brahman that he is Brahman. 532. What indeed can manifest that whose luster, like the sun, causes the whole universe, unsubstantial, unreal, insignificant, to appear at all? 533. What, indeed, can illumine that eternal subject by which the Vedas and Puranas and other scriptures, as well as all beings, are endowed with a meaning? 534. Here is the self-effulgent Atman, of infinite power, beyond the range of conditioned knowledge, yet the common experience of all, realizing which alone this incomparable knower of Brahman lives his glorious life, freed from bondage. 535. Satisfied with undiluted, constant bliss. He is neither grieved nor elated by sense objects, is neither attached nor averse to them, but always disports with the self and takes pleasure therein. 536. A child plays with its toys, forgetting hunger and bodily pains. Exactly so does the man of realization take pleasure in the reality, without ideas of I or mine, and is happy. 537. Men of realization have their food without anxiety or humiliation by begging, and their drink from the water of rivers. They live freely and independently, and sleep without fear in cremation grounds or forests. Their clothing may be the quarters themselves, which need no washing and drying, or any bark, etc. The earth is their bed. They roam in the avenue of the Vedanta, while their pastime is in the Supreme Brahman. 538. The knower of the Atman, who wears no outward mark and is unattached to external things, rests on this body without identification, and experiences all sorts of sense objects as they come, through others' wish, like a child. 539. Established in the ethereal plane of absolute knowledge, he wanders in the world, sometimes like a madman, sometimes like a child, and at other times like a ghoul, having no other clothes on his person except the quarters, or sometimes wearing clothes, or perhaps skins at other times. 540. The sage, living alone, enjoys the sense objects, being the very embodiment of desirelessness, always satisfied with his own self, and himself present at the all. 541. Sometimes a fool, sometimes a sage, sometimes possessed of regal splendor, sometimes wandering, sometimes behaving like a motionless python, sometimes wearing a benignant expression, sometimes honored, sometimes insulted, sometimes unknown. Thus lives the man of realization, ever happy with supreme bliss. 542. Though without riches, yet ever content, though helpless, yet very powerful, though not enjoying the sense objects, yet eternally satisfied, though without an exemplar, yet looking upon all with an eye of equality. 543. Though doing, yet inactive, though experiencing fruits of past actions, yet untouched by them, though possessed of a body, yet without identification with it, though limited, yet omnipresent is he. 544. Neither pleasure nor pain, nor good nor evil, ever touches this knower of Brahman, who always lives without the body idea. 545. Pleasure or pain, or good or evil, affects only him who has connections with the gross body, etc., and identifies himself with these. How can good or evil, or their effects, touch the sage who has identified himself with the reality and thereby shattered his bondage? 546. The sun, which appears to be, but is not actually, swallowed by Rahu, is said to be swallowed, on account of delusion, by people, not knowing the real nature of the sun. 547. Similarly, ignorant people look upon the perfect knower of Brahman, who is wholly rid of bondages of the body etc., as possessed of the body, seeing but an appearance of it. 548. In reality, however, he rests discarding the body, like the snake it slew, and the body is moved hither and thither by the force of the prana, just as it listeth. 549. As a piece of wood is borne by the current to a high or low ground, so is his body carried on by the momentum of past actions to the varied experience of their fruits, as these present themselves in due course. 550. The man of realization, bereft of the body idea, moves amid sense enjoyments like a man subject to transmigration, through desires engendered by the prarabdha work. He himself, however, lives unmoved in the body, like a witness, free from mental oscillations, like the pivot of the potter's wheel. 551. He neither directs the sense organs to their objects nor detaches them from these, but stays like an unconcerned spectator, and he has not the least regard for the fruits of actions, his mind being thoroughly inebriated with drinking the undiluted elixir of the bliss of the Atman. 552. He who, giving up all considerations of the fitness or otherwise of objects of meditation, lives as the absolute Atman, is verily Shiva himself, and he is the best among the knowers of Brahman. 553. Through the destruction of limitations, the perfect knower of Brahman is merged in the one Brahman without a second, which he had been all along, becomes very free even while living, and attains the goal of his life. 554. As an actor, when he puts on the dress of his role, or when he does not, is always a man, so the perfect knower of Brahman is always Brahman and nothing else. 555. It is only the presence or absence of dress that makes the different characters assumed by the actor. The man remains the same always, so this knower of Brahman is always Brahman, not separate from him, no matter in what name or form. 556. Let the body of the sannyasin who has realized his identity with Brahman wither and fall anywhere like the leaf of a tree. It is of little consequence to him, for it has already been burnt by the fire of knowledge. 557. The sage who always lives in the reality, Brahman, as infinite bliss, the one without a second, does not depend upon the customary considerations of place, time, etc., for giving up this mass of skin, flesh and filth. 558. For the giving up of the body is not liberation, nor that of the staff and the water bowl, but liberation consists in the destruction of the heart's knot, which is nescience. 559. If a leaf falls in a small stream, or a river, or a place consecrated by Shiva, or in a crossing of roads, of what good or evil effect is that to the tree? 560. The destruction of the body, organs, pranas and buddhi is like that of a leaf or flower or fruit. To a tree, it does not affect the Atman, the reality, the embodiment of bliss, which is one's true nature, that survives, like the tree. 561. The Shrutis, by setting forth the real nature of the Atman in the words, the embodiment of knowledge, etc., which indicate its reality, speak of the destruction of the apparent limitations merely. 562. The Shruti passage, verily is this Atman immortal, my dear, mentions the immortality of the Atman in the midst of things perishable and subject to modification. 563. Just as a stone, a tree, grass, paddy, husk, etc., when burnt, are reduced to earth, ashes, only, even so the whole objective universe comprising the body, organs, pranas, manas and so forth, are, when burnt by the fire of realization, reduced to the supreme self. 564. As darkness, which is distinct from sunshine, vanishes in the sun's radiance, so the whole objective universe dissolves in Brahman. 565. As when a jar is broken, the space enclosed by it becomes palpably the limitless space, so when the apparent limitations are destroyed, the knower of Brahman verily becomes Brahman itself. 566. As milk poured into milk, oil into oil, and water into water, becomes united Adonai with it, so the sage who has realized the Atman becomes one in the Atman. 567. Realizing thus the extreme isolation that comes of disembodiedness, and becoming eternally identified with the absolute reality, Brahman, the sage no longer suffers transmigration. 568. For his bodies, consisting of nescience etc., having been burnt by the realization of the identity of the Jiva and Brahman, he becomes Brahman itself. And how can Brahman ever have rebirth? 569. Bondage and liberation, which are conjured up by Maya, do not really exist in the Atman, one's reality, as the appearance and exit of the snake do not abide in the rope, which suffers no change. 570. Bondage and liberation may be talked of when there is the presence or absence of a covering veil. But there can be no covering veil for Brahman, which is always uncovered for want of a second thing besides itself. If there be, the non-duality of Brahman will be contradicted, and the Shrutis can never brook duality. 571. Bondage and liberation are attributes of the buddhi which ignorant people falsely superimpose on the reality, as the covering of the eyes by a cloud is transferred to the sun. For this immutable Brahman is knowledge absolute, the one without a second and unattached. 572. The idea that bondage exists, and the idea that it does not, are, with reference to the reality, both attributes of the buddhi merely, and never belong to the eternal reality, Brahman. 573. Hence this bondage and liberation are created by Maya, and are not in the Atman. How can there be any idea of limitation with regard to the supreme truth, which is without parts, without activity, calm, unimpeachable, taintless, and one without a second, as there can be none with regard to the infinite sky? 574. There is neither death nor birth, neither a bound nor a struggling soul, neither a seeker after liberation nor a liberated one. This is the ultimate truth. 575. I have today repeatedly revealed to thee, as to one's own son, this excellent and profound secret, which is the inmost purport of all Vedanta, the crest of the Vedas, considering thee an aspirant after liberation, purged of the taints of this dark age, and of a mind free from desires. 576. Hearing these words of the Guru, the disciple out of reverence prostrated himself before him, and with his permission went his way, freed from bondage. 577. And the Guru, with his mind steeped in the ocean of existence and bliss absolute, roamed, verily purifying the whole world, all differentiating ideas banished from his mind. 578. Thus by way of a dialogue between the teacher and the disciple, has the nature of the Atman been ascertained for the easy comprehension of seekers after liberation. 579. May those sannyasins who are seekers after liberation, who have purged themselves of all taints of the mind by the observance of the prescribed methods, who are averse to worldly pleasures, and who are of serene minds, and take a delight in the Shruti, appreciate this salutary teaching. 580. For those who are afflicted, in the way of the world, by the burning pain due to the scorching sunshine of threefold misery, and who through delusion wander about in a desert in search of water, for them here is the triumphant message of Shankara pointing out, within easy reach, the soothing ocean of nectar. Brahman, the one without a second, to lead them on to liberation.